Stop what you're doing for a second and ask yourself this. If you stripped away your job title, your social media persona, your family role, and all the expectations others have of you, who would you actually be? Here's the uncomfortable truth that Carl Jung discovered over a century ago. Most people die without ever meeting their authentic self. Research shows that 70% of people report feeling disconnected from their true purpose, and studies indicate that only 15% of adults believe they're living authentically. They spend their entire lives performing in a play they never auditioned for, following a script written by people who don't even know their real name. You know that nagging feeling you get sometimes, like you're living someone else's life? That moment when you catch yourself in the mirror and think, is this really me? That's not anxiety or quarter-life crisis talking. That's your true self, buried under decades of personas and expectations, desperately trying to get your attention. And here's what's going to blow your mind. The person you think you are right now might be nothing more than a carefully constructed mask that you've worn so long, you've forgotten it's removable. Jung spent his life studying why brilliant, successful people often feel hollow inside, and what he discovered will challenge everything you think you know about identity and self-discovery. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share the psychological secrets that most people never learn, why your unconscious mind is making decisions for you, how your shadow self is sabotaging your growth, and the specific steps Jung outlined for breaking free from false identity. By the end of this video, you'll have a roadmap for the most important journey you'll ever take, the journey back to yourself. But here's my warning. This isn't feel-good self-help content. This is deep psychological work that will make you question fundamental assumptions about who you are and why you make the choices you make. If you're ready for that level of self-awareness and authentic transformation, hit that like button right now, subscribe to the channel for more life-changing insights, and let's dive into Carl Jung's blueprint for finding your real self. Because once you understand what I'm about to share, you'll never be able to unconsciously live someone else's life again. You know that feeling when you're at work, putting on your professional face, and suddenly you catch yourself in the mirror. For just a split second you might wonder, who's that person staring back at me? Here's the thing, that moment of confusion isn't random. It's your authentic self recognizing the mask you've been wearing so long, you've almost forgotten it's there. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, and it's literally running your life without you realizing it. Think about it. How different are you at work versus with your family, versus with your friends? If the differences are dramatic, you're not adapting, you're fragmenting. The scary part? Most people never question these masks. They'll spend decades perfecting their good student persona, then their successful professional persona, then their responsible parent persona, all while their true self gets buried deeper and deeper. It's like being an actor who's played the same role for so long, they've forgotten their real name. You wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's script, hitting marks that were set by people who don't even know the real you. The persona becomes a prison, but here's the kicker. It's a prison with the door wide open that most people never think to walk through. Let me paint you a picture. Sarah, a lawyer I know, spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, wearing power suits, speaking in boardroom jargon, making six figures. On paper, she was crushing it, but every Sunday night she'd get this knot in her stomach about Monday morning. She thought it was just work stress. Turns out, it was her authentic self suffocating under layers of professional personas. The real Sarah was creative, loved working with her hands, and had zero interest in corporate politics. But she'd worn the successful lawyer mask so long, she didn't know how to take it off, or even that she could. The breakthrough moment comes when you start noticing the gaps, those little moments when your mask slips and your real personality peeks through. Maybe it's when you're laughing with genuine joy, or when you get passionate about something that has nothing to do with your image. Pay attention to those moments, because they're breadcrumbs leading you back to your authentic self. But here's what Jung discovered. Understanding the persona is just the beginning. Once you realize you're wearing masks, you have to ask yourself, what's underneath them? And more importantly, What's been controlling the show from backstage while you've been busy performing? Ever notice how you can make a decision that seems completely logical, only to regret it later and wonder, what was I thinking? Well, here's the plot twist. You probably weren't thinking at all. At least not consciously. Carl Jung's research revealed that our unconscious mind is like an iceberg. What we're aware of is just the tiny tip floating above water, while this massive, powerful structure lurks beneath the surface, steering the ship of our lives. Your unconscious doesn't ask permission, it just acts. And most of the time, you're along for the ride, convinced you're the one driving. Think about your daily habits, your automatic reactions, the type of people you're attracted to, or the patterns you keep repeating in relationships. These aren't conscious choices, they're unconscious programs running in the background of your mind. Take Mike, for instance. He consciously wanted a loving relationship, but kept dating emotionally unavailable women. Turns out, his unconscious was recreating the dynamic with his distant mother, trying to win the love he never received as a child. Or consider Jennifer, who thought she chose her career in accounting because she was good with numbers, but realized later it was her unconscious trying to gain her perfectionist father's approval through financial success. It's like having software installed on your computer that you never remember downloading, but it's constantly affecting how everything else operates. Here's where it gets really wild. Jung discovered that we don't just have personal unconscious material. We're also plugged into something called the collective unconscious. It's like being connected to a massive database of human experiences and patterns that goes back thousands of years. Ever wonder why certain symbols, stories, or situations feel familiar even when you've never encountered them before? Or why you sometimes have gut reactions that you can't explain logically? That's the collective unconscious talking. You're not just dealing with your own stuff, you're carrying the psychological DNA of humanity. The kicker is this. Most people go through their entire lives never realizing they're being influenced by these hidden forces. They think their preferences, their fears, their ambitions are all theirs, but they're actually operating from unconscious scripts they inherited or absorbed. It's like being in a play where everyone else knows their lines, but nobody told you what role you're supposed to be playing. But here's the thing Jung figured out. Once you start becoming aware of these unconscious influences, you can begin to see which ones are serving you and which ones are sabotaging your chance at authentic self-discovery. And that's when you realize there's another player in this psychological drama, one that most people spend their whole lives running from. Let's talk about the part of yourself you probably don't want to acknowledge exists. Jung called it the shadow, and it's basically everything about yourself that you've decided is unacceptable, embarrassing, or bad. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more good and moral you try to appear on the surface, the bigger and more powerful your shadow becomes. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more explosive it becomes when it finally pops up. Your shadow isn't going anywhere, and the energy you spend trying to suppress it could be used for something way more productive, integrating it. Most people think shadow work means becoming a bad person or giving in to their worst impulses. That's not it at all. Your shadow contains rejected parts of yourself, but not all of those parts are actually negative. Maybe you were told as a kid that being emotional was weak, so you buried your sensitivity. Maybe you learned that being too confident was selfish, so you dimmed your natural leadership abilities. Your shadow might contain your suppressed creativity, your authentic anger about injustice, or your natural sexuality. These aren't bad things, they're parts of you that got labeled as unacceptable, so you shoved them into the basement of your psyche. Here's what happens when you ignore your shadow. It starts running your life from behind the scenes. Ever notice how the things that annoy you most about other people are often the exact things you refuse to see in yourself? That's projection. Your shadow using other people as a movie screen to show you what you won't look at directly. The overly critical person you can't stand. Check if you've got some suppressed criticism. The attention seeker who drives you crazy? Maybe you've buried your own need to be seen and heard. Jung said, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It's like the universe is constantly giving you mirrors, but most people just get mad at the reflection. The breakthrough happens when you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be whole. Shadow integration isn't about acting out every impulse. It's about acknowledging all parts of yourself so they stop controlling you unconsciously. When you can own your capacity for anger, you become more genuine in your kindness. When you can admit your selfishness, your generosity becomes more authentic. It's counterintuitive, but accepting your dark side actually makes you more balanced and, paradoxically, more moral. But here's what Jung discovered. Your personal shadow is just one layer of the psychological puzzle. There are deeper, more universal patterns at play, patterns that connect you to every human who's ever lived, and understanding them might just be the key to finally breaking free from the invisible prison most people never even realize they're in. You think your thoughts are your own, but Jung discovered something that'll blow your mind. You're walking around with the psychological software of thousands of years of human experience. The collective unconscious isn't just some abstract concept, it's actively shaping your daily life through what Jung called archetypes. These are universal patterns of behavior and experience that show up across all cultures and time periods. The hero, the mother, the wise old man, the rebel, these aren't just characters in stories. They're psychological templates running in your mind right now, influencing your decisions and shaping your identity. Think about how you automatically know what a hero's journey looks like, even if you've never studied mythology. Or how certain images, like a wise old tree, a protective mother, or a dangerous serpent, trigger immediate emotional responses. Consider how David, a software engineer, found himself inexplicably drawn to extreme sports and adventure travel. He thought it was just stress relief, but it was actually the hero archetype seeking expression in his otherwise mundane corporate life. Or look at Maria, who couldn't understand why she felt compelled to rescue every stray animal and struggling friend, until she recognized the mother archetype operating through her, even though she had no children of her own. That's the collective unconscious at work. You're not just dealing with your personal history, you're carrying the dreams, fears, and wisdom of humanity itself. Here's where it gets really interesting. Modern society has weaponized these archetypal patterns. Advertisers, politicians, and social media platforms have figured out how to trigger your deepest psychological responses. They'll sell you the hero's journey through a new car purchase, or the mother's love through a brand of soup. Netflix knows that showing you a lone warrior against impossible odds will activate your hero archetype, while Instagram influencers tap into your sage archetype by promising ancient wisdom for modern problems. They're not selling products, they're selling archetypal experiences. And because these patterns operate below conscious awareness, you feel like you're making personal choices when you're actually responding to universal psychological triggers. The real kicker? Most people never question whether their dreams and aspirations are authentically theirs or just cultural programming. You might think you want a big house, a perfect relationship, or a prestigious career, but what if those desires aren't coming from your true self? What if they're just collective archetypal patterns that society has taught you to value? Jung realized that true individuation requires separating your authentic desires from the collective expectations. You have to learn to distinguish between what you genuinely want and what the collective unconscious is telling you to want. And that's when you start to realize that the journey inward isn't just about finding yourself, it's about discovering which self is actually yours versus which one you've been programmed to think is yours. Here's the moment of truth. Jung discovered that real life doesn't begin until you start the process of individuation, becoming who you actually are instead of who everyone else expects you to be. But here's the catch. This journey inward is probably the most uncomfortable thing you'll ever do. It's like taking off clothes you've worn so long you forgot they weren't your skin. Most people would rather stay miserable in a familiar identity than risk the uncertainty of discovering their authentic self. That's why so many people hit what we call a midlife crisis. It's not really about age, It's about your true self finally getting loud enough to be heard over the noise of your personas. The signs that you're living someone else's life are usually subtle at first. You might feel successful but not fulfilled. You might achieve goals and wonder why the victory feels hollow. You might find yourself saying, "I should be happy," more often than you actually feel happy. These aren't character flaws. They're your authentic self sending up flares, trying to get your attention. Jung called this the call to individuation, and it usually shows up as a persistent feeling that something's missing, even when your life looks perfect on paper. It's like your soul is tapping you on the shoulder saying, "Hey, remember me? I've been waiting down here while you've been busy impressing everyone else." The journey inward requires what Jung called active imagination. Basically, you have to start paying attention to the messages from your unconscious mind through dreams, fantasies, and spontaneous thoughts. Most people dismiss these as just imagination, but Jung realized they're actually communications from parts of yourself that don't speak in words. Your dreams aren't random. They're your psyche's way of showing you what needs attention. That recurring dream about being lost? That fantasy about a completely different career? That random urge to create something artistic? These aren't distractions from your real life. They might be the breadcrumbs leading you back to your real life. But here's what Jung figured out. Individuation isn't a destination, it's a process. You don't just find yourself, and then you're done. It's more like peeling an onion. Every layer you remove reveals another layer underneath. And just when you think you've got it figured out, life presents you with a new challenge that requires you to go deeper. The goal isn't to become perfect, it's to become whole. To integrate all the scattered pieces of yourself, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, into something authentic and uniquely yours. And that's when you realize that breaking free from false identity isn't just about removing what doesn't belong to you, it's about having the courage to become who you really are, even if that person doesn't fit the mold everyone expects you to fill. All right, let's get practical. You've recognized the masks, you've acknowledged the unconscious programming, you've met your shadow, and you understand the collective patterns. Now what? How do you actually break free from a false identity that's been running your life for years, maybe decades? Jung's approach wasn't about dramatic overnight transformation. It was about what he called holding the tension of opposites. Instead of choosing between your personas and throwing them all away, you learn to consciously choose when and how to use them, rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. Start with this. Pay attention to when you feel most alive versus when you feel like you're performing. Your authentic self has a different energy signature than your personas. When you're being genuinely yourself, time seems to flow differently. You're not monitoring how you're coming across because you're too engaged in what you're actually doing. It's like the difference between dancing because you love the music versus dancing because people are watching. Your body knows the difference, even when your mind doesn't. Keep a simple log for a week. When did you feel energized versus drained? When did you feel like yourself versus when did you feel like you were acting? The patterns will surprise you. Here's a strategy Jung would approve of. Start having conversations with different parts of yourself. I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. When you notice a strong emotion or reaction, instead of just dismissing it, get curious. Ask it what it's trying to tell you. If you're feeling angry, don't just push it down. Ask your anger what boundary got crossed. If you're feeling anxious, ask your anxiety what it's trying to protect you from. These aren't signs of mental illness. They're different aspects of your psyche trying to communicate. Most people spend their lives at war with parts of themselves, but Jung discovered that integration comes through dialogue, not domination. The most powerful tool for breaking free from false identity is what Jung called conscious suffering. This doesn't mean being miserable. It means staying present with discomfort instead of immediately escaping into familiar patterns. When you feel the urge to put on a mask, pause. When you notice yourself doing something for approval rather than authentic desire, stay with that tension. When your shadow gets triggered, instead of projecting it onto someone else, sit with what it's showing you about yourself. This conscious awareness of your patterns is what gradually weakens their automatic power over you. But here's the thing Jung warned about. Breaking free from false identity comes with a cost, and you need to know what you're signing up for before you commit to this path. Let's be brutally honest about what happens when you start living authentically. Some people aren't going to like it. Your family might feel uncomfortable because you're not playing your assigned role anymore. Your friends might resist because your growth highlights their own stagnation. Your colleagues might be confused because you're not following the same script everyone else is reading from. Jung discovered that individuation often requires what he called necessary suffering, the discomfort of disappointing people who preferred your false self. It's like being the first person to take off a mask at a masquerade party. Everyone else suddenly feels overdressed. The hardest part isn't other people's reactions. It's your own internal resistance. Your ego has invested years, maybe decades, in building and maintaining your false identity. It's going to fight you every step of the way because authenticity feels like death to the ego. You might experience what Jung called the dark night of the soul periods where you feel lost, confused, or like you don't know who you are anymore. That's actually a good sign. It means you're in the space between your old identity and your emerging authentic self. It's uncomfortable as hell, but it's also where the real transformation happens. Most people turn back at this point because the uncertainty feels unbearable. But here's what makes it worth it. When you align with your authentic self, you tap into what Jung called your life force. It's like the difference between swimming against the current and swimming with it. Decisions become clearer because you're not trying to maintain multiple contradictory identities. Relationships become deeper because you're bringing your real self to the table instead of a carefully constructed image. Work becomes more meaningful because you're operating from your genuine talents and interests instead of what you think you should be doing. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be perfect and start energizing yourself by being real. The ultimate reward of authenticity is what Jung called wholeness, not perfection, but the integration of all aspects of yourself into something coherent and uniquely yours. You become comfortable with your contradictions instead of trying to resolve them. You can be strong and vulnerable, confident and humble, independent and connected. You stop trying to fit into categories and start creating your own definition of what it means to be human. And here's the beautiful paradox Jung discovered. The more authentically individual you become, the more deeply you connect with the universal human experience. By becoming fully yourself, you become fully human. The journey inward doesn't isolate you from others. It finally allows you to meet them as who you really are, rather than as who you think they want you to be. So here's where we are. You now understand that the life you've been living might not actually be yours. You've seen how personas, unconscious programming, and collective expectations have been pulling your strings like a puppet master you never knew existed. But knowledge without action is just sophisticated procrastination. The question isn't whether you understand Jung's insights, it's whether you're brave enough to act on them. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to do something that might feel uncomfortable. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, what parts of my life am I living for other people's approval? Don't just think about it. Actually say it out loud and listen to what comes up. Your authentic self has been waiting for this conversation your entire life. Tomorrow, pick one small area where you know you're wearing a mask and try showing up as your real self instead. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe it's expressing an opinion you usually keep to yourself, or saying no to something you don't actually want to do. But here's what I really want you to understand. This journey of self-discovery isn't a solo mission. The algorithms of social media are designed to keep you distracted from this kind of deep inner work. They profit from your unconsciousness, from keeping you focused on external validation rather than internal authenticity. By engaging with content like this, by liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and sharing these insights with people who need to hear them, you're not just supporting creators like me. You're actively resisting a system that wants to keep you asleep to your own potential. So if this video sparked something in you, If it made you question patterns you've been unconsciously following, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and ring the notification bell because we're just getting started on this journey of psychological awakening. Share this video with someone who you think is living behind a mask. Sometimes the people we love need permission to remove their personas too. And let me know in the comments, what's one mask you're ready to take off? What's one area of your life where you know you're not being authentic? Your courage to share might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to start their own journey back to themselves. Because here's Jung's final insight. The world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs your authentic contribution.